should start with my sister before I tell you what happened after she died. Because if I don't, none of it makes sense. Her name was Mara. She was 26 when she died and 2 years older than me. We grew up in a small town that had one grocery store, one gas station, one church everybody pretended not to hate, and a long strip of road where every bad thing seemed to happen. People there liked to say nothing ever changed. That was true if you were talking about the buildings. It was not true if you were talking about what people did behind closed doors. Mara used to say the town was rotten under the paint. She said it when she was 16, and saying stuff like that sounded dramatic. But she kept saying it as an adult too. And the older she got, the less dramatic it sounded. She wasn't the kind of person people forgot. She had dark hair she cut herself over the bathroom sink, usually too short in one place and too long in another, and a stare that made people feel like she was waiting for them to lie. She worked at a home care office in the next county, driving old people to appointments and dropping off meals. She smoked when she was stressed, drank cheap beer when she was bored, and had a way of laughing at the wrong time that made other people feel embarrassed, even when they were the ones acting stupid. We were not soft with each other. We fought plenty. She stole my things when we were kids. I broke one of her fingers in a car door by accident, and she brought it up for 10 years, as if I had done it on purpose. If I said something dumb, she told me. If she needed help, she acted like asking for it was the same as bleeding in public. But if I called her in the middle of the night and said I had car trouble, she would show up. If I was sick, she would leave soup on my porch and not knock because she didn't want to talk. That was how she loved people. Sideways. When our mother died, Mara was the one who cleaned out the trailer. I couldn't do it. There were too many things in there that still felt warm somehow. Hair stuck in brushes, a half bottle of perfume under the sink, one of those sweaters mothers keep forever because it stopped fitting but still smells like them. Mara did all of it with rubber gloves and a black trash bag roll under her arm. She worked quietly. No crying, no speeches. Then when the place was empty, she sat on the porch steps, lit a cigarette, and cried so hard she threw up in the dirt. That's the version of her I keep seeing now. Not the dead one. The one on the steps, furious at herself for being human. She died in November, when the cold came early and stuck. I found out because Sheriff Darnell knocked on my apartment door before sunrise, hat in his hands, face already arranged into the shape people use when they want your body to understand something before your brain does. I knew before he said her name. People always say that. Usually I think they're lying. This time I knew. I had gone to bed uneasy and woken up twice for no reason, like some part of me had been waiting for bad news and didn't trust sleep. When I saw him through the peephole, I felt the bottom drop out of me. He asked if he could come in. I said no and opened the door wider anyway. My apartment smelled like laundry detergent and old coffee. He stood in the doorway and told me there had been an incident on County Route 8. Mara's car had been found in a drainage ditch near the tree line. There was evidence she had been attacked. I remember him talking after that, but it came apart in my ears. Words like scene and body and no sign of robbery. I remember leaning one hand against the wall because my knees stopped feeling dependable. He asked if there was someone I could call. I said, "What happened to her?" He looked away. That told me more than anything else. I asked again. He said there had been severe trauma. Severe trauma. That was the phrase he used for what had been done to my sister. The details came later, and they never got easier. She had left work after dark. She stopped at the gas station by the old feed store. The camera there showed her buying cigarettes and a soda, shoving change into her jacket pocket, talking briefly to a man off camera near the entrance. The footage had no sound. She turned her head once like she was annoyed. Then she walked out carrying the soda and cigarettes. That was the last time she was seen alive by anyone who ever admitted it. Her car was found the next morning with the driver's side door open. There was blood on the seat, blood on the gravel, blood on the dead grass beyond the ditch. Too much blood for any hopeful misunderstanding. They found her 50 yards into the trees. She had been beaten first. That part was obvious. Face smashed badly enough that I was told not to view the body, which only guaranteed that I pictured it worse. Her jaw was broken. 3 teeth were missing. There were bruises on her neck and wrists. Her left hand had deep cuts across the palm like she'd grabbed at something sharp. Her ribs were damaged. 1 lung collapsed. The medical examiner believed she'd been alive through a lot of it. Then came the part people in town lowered their voices for, even though nobody had the decency to stop talking. Her stomach had been opened. Not by an animal. Not by accident. Opened. The cut was rough and deep, not surgical, not clean. Whoever did it used force and kept going. The examiner said she might already have been dead by then, but he could not say for sure. There was dirt inside the wound, pine needles, leaves. It sounded less like a report than a punishment. No one was arrested. That's the simple version. A woman leaves work, buys cigarettes, disappears, turns up butchered in the woods, and somehow the person who did it keeps breathing the same air as everybody else. The sheriff's office worked it, then the state police, then nobody. Rumors took over where evidence failed. People said it was a drifter, a jealous ex, though she didn't have one. A drug thing, though Mara barely touched anything stronger than beer. Somebody from the gas station, a trucker, somebody she knew, somebody she trusted, somebody who hated women, somebody who wanted to know what the inside of a person looked like. I heard all of it. I also heard that she had asked for it, though never in those exact words. They said she mouthed off too much, dressed rough, took rides from men she shouldn't have, went places alone. One woman at the diner said Mara always had the look of a girl headed for trouble. I asked her what that look was supposed to be, and she said, "You know." I told her I didn't. She stopped coming to my register after that. I was working at Harlow's Hardware then, stocking shelves and cutting pipe. It was the kind of job that leaves your hands dirty even after you wash them. Men would come in for furnace filters and deer salt and ask how I was holding up like they were checking weather. Some were kind. Most were curious. A few wanted details. I learned to recognize that look too. The appetite people get when horror happens close enough to smell, but not close enough to stain them. After the funeral, I moved into Mara's house for what I told myself would be a week. It was a rental on the edge of town, a narrow 1-story place with cheap siding and a patchy yard. The landlord wanted to be paid through the end of the month whether anyone lived there or not, and I could not stand the idea of strangers clearing her things into boxes. So I brought a duffel bag, some clothes, my toothbrush, and the false confidence grief gives you when you mistake numbness for strength. The house was exactly how she had left it. A plate in the sink with dried sauce on it, boots by the door, a jacket over the kitchen chair. 2 cans of soup in the cupboard, one of them dented. The blanket she kept on the couch. Receipts. Hair ties. A coffee mug with a crack near the handle. Her ashtray on the back step with 3 cigarette butts bent against the rim. I opened the fridge and saw half a sandwich in foil and had to sit down on the floor because it was too ordinary. Murder makes people sound finished. A sandwich in a fridge says they expected lunch tomorrow. I slept in her bed the first night and hated myself for it. It felt like trying on someone's skin. I moved to the couch after that. The first strange thing happened on the 3rd night. Though even now I hate calling it strange because that word feels cheap. I woke up because I heard footsteps in the hall. Not the house settling. Not pipes. Real steps. Soft, slow. Crossing from the kitchen toward the bathroom. I was wide awake at once. The room was dark except for the weak yellow streetlight leaking through the blinds. I listened. Nothing. Then one more step, like a shoe scraping lightly over the floor. I got up, grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the couch, and moved down the hall with my heart punching so hard my hands shook against the wood. The bathroom was empty. Kitchen empty. Back door still locked. Windows shut. I checked the bedrooms. Closets. Shower curtain. Under the beds. Which made me feel ridiculous until I remembered what had happened to her and stopped feeling ridiculous about anything. No one. I stood there in the dark house with the bat in my hands and listened until my ears hurt. Eventually I went back to the couch. I did not sleep again. The next day I told myself it was grief. New place, bad dreams, nerves. I went through drawers and closets because practical tasks are the only things that hold still when your mind won't. I found bills, birthday cards, expired coupons, a shoebox full of receipts, and a stack of notebooks in the bedroom closet under winter sweaters. Mara always wrote things down. Grocery lists, phone numbers, angry thoughts. She said if she didn't, they sat in her skull and soured. Most of the notebooks were exactly that. Lists, bits of work schedules, recipes copied from somewhere, pages of complaints about customers. Then I found one with dates on nearly every page, and the writing tighter than usual. At first I thought it was a work log. Then I realized she was recording things she had noticed around town. A dark pickup parked outside the old Miller place 3 nights in a row. A man in a red jacket at the gas station watching women walk to their cars. A teenage girl from Birch Road, getting into a car with someone old enough to be her father. A note about hearing screams carry from the woods behind the abandoned chicken houses and finding nothing there the next morning but beer cans and a tarp. Names were written too, some crossed out, some underlined. A few had question marks beside them. Sheriff Darnell's nephew, the owner of the tire shop, a home care client's son, a man named Curtis Vale, who lived beyond the river and had done time years ago for assault. There were pages about a woman named Elaine Rooker, who had gone missing for 2 days back in spring and come home with a broken nose, then told everyone she fell. Mara had written, "She didn't fall." She looked at me and wanted me to stop asking. On another page, somebody is getting away with things because nobody wants trouble. Same as always. I sat at the kitchen table and read until the light outside changed. Part of me felt sick, because this was the first real thing I'd found that connected to the fear she always carried around like a sharpened nail in her pocket. Another part of me felt angry, because if she had something this serious, why hadn't she taken it to somebody? Then I remembered who somebody would have been. This was a town where men covered for each other out of habit, where a bruise became an accident if enough people needed it to. Mara knew that better than anyone. That evening I took the notebook to the sheriff's office. Darnell was not there. His deputy, Glenn Pritchard, looked at it with the expression of a man being handed homework 5 minutes before quitting time. He flipped through some pages and said, "This could be nothing." I said, "Then you can rule it out." He nodded the kind of nod people do when they plan to put something in a drawer. He told me they'd add it to the file. I asked if anyone had followed up on the man at the gas station. He said they had talked to several people. I asked if Curtis Vale had been questioned. He said they were pursuing all relevant leads. He did not look at me when he said it. I went back to Mara's house angry enough to shake. That night I heard the footsteps again. This time they started in the kitchen. I sat up on the couch and listened to a slow movement across the linoleum. A pause. Then the faint click of the back door latch. I ran to it with the bat. The chain was still set. The knob did not move under my hand, but cold air drifted from somewhere, and I could smell wet leaves, the smell of the ditch where they found her car. I switched on the kitchen light. There was mud on the floor. Not a lot. 3 partial shoe prints and a smear, dark and damp against the worn linoleum, leading from the back door toward the hall. I stared at them until my eyes watered. I was not confused. I was not half asleep anymore. There was mud on the floor. I checked the door. Locked. Chain still in place. Window above the sink latched. I opened the back door and looked outside with the porch light on. The yard was empty. Beyond it, the dark fields rolled out toward the trees and the road. No sound but distant traffic and wind rubbing at the bare branches. I called the sheriff's office. Glenn came out 40 minutes later. He stood in the kitchen with the same bored face and said the prints looked old. I said they were not old. He bent, touched one with a finger, held it up. "It's dry already." I asked if he thought I had put them there myself. He said no, but the back door was old and maybe not sealed right. Could have tracked in from earlier. It took everything in me not to hit him with the bat. After he left, I washed the floor on my hands and knees and kept looking over my shoulder the whole time. I should tell you here that I did not believe in ghosts. I still don't. Not in the way people mean it. White dresses, cold spots, dead relatives standing at the end of beds. I had never seen anything in my life that made me think the dead were hanging around waiting for the right dramatic lighting. What I believed then was simpler, and maybe worse. I believed somebody had been in that house. I changed the locks the next day without asking the landlord. Then I started going through Mara's things with a different kind of attention. Not looking for memories. Looking for whatever she had gotten herself into before she died. I found a loose floorboard under her bed because the wood there was scratched near one nail. Underneath was a freezer bag wrapped in an old t-shirt. Inside were photographs, not developed nicely. Drugstore prints, some blurry, some taken through dirty windows, some clearly snapped in a hurry. The dark pickup from the notebook. A man standing outside the gas station with his back turned, red jacket, cigarette in one hand. Curtis Vale on his porch, shirtless and mean-looking, staring directly toward the camera like he knew he was being watched. the side of the abandoned chicken houses. A girl I recognized from town, maybe 17, crying in the passenger seat of a car while an older man leaned over her. One photo showed two men behind Miller's old property, carrying something heavy wrapped in a tarp. Only their sides were visible, not their faces, but one had a bent right leg, a limp. In the background, parked near the fence line, was Sheriff Darnell's department SUV. I looked at that picture for a long time. Maybe there was some innocent explanation. Maybe not. What I felt was a hardening inside me, something moving from grief into purpose. There was also a flash drive in the bag. I nearly snapped it trying to get the cap off. My laptop was old and slow. It took forever to recognize the drive. When it finally did, there were 6 video files and a folder full of scanned documents. The documents were mostly public records Mara had printed or photographed. Court paperwork, arrest logs, property maps, business licenses. She had highlighted names, crossed connections between people. It looked obsessive until it didn't. A lot of the same names kept appearing. Curtis Vale, Deputy Glenn Pritchard's cousin, Randy Lusk, a towing company owner named Jeff Corman, Darnell's nephew, Tate, the Miller property owner. The first video was just road footage at night from inside Mara's car. She had placed her phone on the dash and recorded herself following a pickup down the old river road. You could hear her breathing and muttering to herself. The truck turned through a gate by the chicken houses. She drove past, killed her headlights, then turned around and stopped far enough back to stay hidden. A few minutes later, another set of headlights came down the road. A sheriff's department, SUV. It pulled through the same gate. The second video was shakier, filmed from behind brush. Men moving with flashlights near one of the buildings, voices too muffled to make out. At one point, someone shouted and Mara ducked so fast the camera hit the ground. When she picked it up again, a woman was screaming somewhere inside the building. Not movie screaming, not long and theatrical. Short bursts of panic and pain. Human. Embarrassingly human. Then the file ended. I just sat there with my hand over my mouth. The third video showed daylight, the outside of the Miller place. Mara whispering that she knew somebody was keeping women there. She said no one would listen because every time somebody went missing, half the town turned blind, and the other half said it was drugs. She zoomed in on a side door with a new lock and a small vent near the ground covered in mesh. She whispered, "You can hear them from the trees if the wind is right." The fourth video was the last one she recorded of herself. She was in her kitchen, same kitchen I was sitting in. She looked tired and angry. One side of her face was bruised yellow along the jaw. She said if anything happened to her, the cops should not be trusted with the evidence first. She named Darnell, Glenn, Tate. She said she had seen enough to know they were involved or protecting someone who was. She said girls were being held, used, moved and paid for by men who sat in church on Sunday. She said she had one name that mattered more than the others, but wanted proof before she put it anywhere permanent. Then she looked straight into the camera and said, "If I go missing, check under Nina Cobb's trailer." Nina Cobb had been dead 7 years. I rewound that line twice, same words each time. I knew Nina. Everybody did. She was the kind of woman little kids avoided because she yelled at dogs, smelled like old grease, and had a cataract eye that never looked the same direction as the other. She lived alone on a half-collapsed property off Ash Creek Road and died in her kitchen from a stroke, or that's what people said. No family nearby. The county cleaned the place out, sold the land cheap, and somebody put a storage shed there. I had not thought about her in years. The fifth video would not open at first. When it finally did, it was only 19 seconds long. Dark, jostling, heavy breathing. Mara saying, "Don't touch me." A man's voice telling her to be smart. Then a sound like someone being hit. The phone tipped sideways. There was a glimpse of a dashboard, then a face close to the lens for half a second. Not clear, but enough. Deputy Glenn Pritchard. The sixth file was audio only. I heard Mara and another woman talking in a car. The other woman sounded terrified and wouldn't give her name. She said she had been taken after leaving a bar over in Halpern County, held in a building with no windows, fed crackers and water. Men came and went. One of them wore a sheriff's uniform once, maybe for a joke, maybe real. She didn't know. She said the girls who fought got hurt worse. She said one girl had her ear cut nearly off for biting a man's hand. She said a girl named Becca tried to run, and they dragged her back by her ankles over gravel until the back of her head looked peeled. Then the woman started crying too hard to speak, and Mara told her she would figure it out. She would get somebody safe. She just needed names. The recording ended with a car door shutting. I sat there until the laptop screen went dark. I should have taken everything and driven straight to the state police barracks an hour away. I know that. I've replayed it enough. But understand this. By that point, I was in a house where someone had already been inside, in a town where the local cops might be involved in trafficking women, with proof my sister had known it and had died for it. Panic changes your sense of what a good decision is. I packed the photos, the drive, and the notebook into my duffel bag. Then I went outside to my truck and nearly walked straight into a man standing at the side of the house. He stepped out from the dark between the wall and the hedge like he had grown there. It was Tate Darnell. Sheriff Darnell's nephew was a year younger than Mara and had been a loser since high school. Thin beard, greasy hair, lazy eyes that never fully focused on you. He had that harmless town idiot look people mistake for innocence. He smiled when he saw how hard I jumped. "Didn't mean to scare you," he said. He was holding a six-pack by the top rings like he had dropped by to be neighborly. I said, "What are you doing here?" "Just checking on you." "You don't know me well enough to check on me." He looked past me toward the house. "Heard you were staying here." "Who told you that?" He shrugged. The wind moved through the hedge behind him, and for one ugly second I pictured Mara in those woods beyond the ditch, hearing a man say, "Don't make it hard." I kept my voice level. "Go home." He smiled again, but the smile slipped at the edges. "You find anything in there?" Mara was always collecting weird stuff. Made people nervous. That set every alarm off in me at once. I said, "Why would you care?" He took one step closer. "Because she liked making trouble. And trouble doesn't die with one person." I grabbed the tire iron from the truck bed without looking. When I brought it up, he put both hands out and laughed like I was overreacting. "Easy," he said. "I'm just talking." "Leave." He stood there another second, then walked backward toward the road, still smiling. He left the six-pack in the grass. I didn't go back in the house. I got in my truck with the bag and drove. I made it 6 miles before headlights came up behind me fast. I knew before the bar lights flashed who it was. Glenn's cruiser filled my rearview mirror, red and blue rolling across the cab. I pulled over because there was no choice. Fields on both sides. No houses. No traffic. He took his time getting out. When he reached my window, he did not ask for license or registration. He shined the flashlight in my face and said, "You got somewhere to be?" I said, "State Barracks." He nodded slowly like I had told him a joke. "Why's that?" "Because I'm done talking to you." He let the beam move over the seat, the duffel bag, the passenger floorboard. "Step out of the vehicle." I said no. His expression changed in a way I'll never forget. Not anger exactly. Relief. Like the polite part of his evening was over. He opened the door himself, grabbed my jacket, and hauled me halfway out before I could brace. I swung at him and hit his shoulder. He slammed my head against the doorframe. White burst behind my eyes. He got me onto the gravel on my knees with one hand twisted in my hair and the other jamming my arm up my back. "You think your sister was smart?" he said close to my ear. She screamed too. There are moments in your life where the world becomes very small. Gravel digging into my knees, cold air in my nose, his breath smelling like coffee and old meat. That sentence. I stopped fighting for 1 second because it was too much. That second probably saved me. His attention shifted when another car approached from the opposite direction. Just enough. Headlights washed over us. He loosened. I drove my elbow backward into his ribs and felt it land right. He cursed. I lurched up, half falling, and ran for my truck. He grabbed my jacket hood, tore it, got a hand on my shoulder. I turned and hit him with the tire iron so hard I felt the shock all the way to my teeth. I hit him in the side of the head. He went down. Not dramatic. Just folded crooked onto the gravel with one arm under him. Blood darkened near his ear. The passing car did not stop. I stared at him, waiting for movement. When he twitched, I got in my truck and drove. I did not go to the state barracks. I know. But my head was ringing. I was shaking hard enough to miss gears. And all I could think was that if Glenn had pulled me over, then somebody had already told him I had found something. I started imagining other cruisers ahead, roadblocks, stories written before I arrived. Local deputy assaulted in the line of duty by grieving unstable brother. It would not have been a hard sell. So I drove the other direction, toward Ash Creek Road, toward Nina Cobb's old trailer lot. The property sat off a washed-out side road behind a line of dead pines. The trailer was gone. In its place stood a metal storage shed and a mess of waist-high grass. The moon was bright enough to see by when clouds shifted. I parked under trees, killed the engine, and took a shovel from the truck bed, because apparently some part of me had already decided I believed Mara. The ground behind where the trailer had sat was softer than the rest. I found that out fast. You can tell yourself 100 things while you dig in the dark. Old stash, hidden files, a box, cash, anything except what it turned out to be. The shovel hit plastic first. Thick black sheeting. I crouched, pulled at one corner, and the smell came out. Sweet, rotten, wet. I had smelled roadkill before. This was worse because it had been packed down and kept. I uncovered a hand. It was white in the moonlight and missing 2 fingers. I dropped backward and vomited into the grass. After that, I worked slower. The plastic wrapped around more than one body. It was a pit, not a grave. Women layered and folded in on themselves where there had not been enough care or enough room to make them look human. Bones showing through skin in places, hair matted in black ropes, clothing twisted up around ribs and hips. One skull with dark curls still stuck to it, and the lower jaw hanging open. Another body fresher than the rest, bloated and split, a necklace still around the throat. There were at least 5, maybe 7. I could not make myself count properly. One had the side of her head crushed in. One had no feet. One was naked from the waist down. There was a smell of lime under the rot, like somebody had made a lazy attempt to speed things along. I stood there with the shovel in both hands and realized with absolute clarity that my sister had not died because she was unlucky. She died because she dug too close to the truth, and the truth had a hole full of women in it. I covered the pit back up enough that it would not be obvious from the road, got in the truck, and drove to the one person I thought might still have enough decency to act outside the town. Dr. Levin. He was the county medical examiner, lived alone above his office, and had done my mother's paperwork years before. He was not warm. He was exact. But exact is useful when warmth gets people killed. I banged on his door until he answered in a robe, furious, then saw my face and the blood in my hair, and let me in without a word. I told him enough. Not everything. Enough to make him go pale. At first he said he wanted nothing to do with politics or accusations. Then I mentioned the pit. That changed him. He made coffee while I copied the flash drive and the documents onto his office computer. He looked through the files in silence, jaw working. When the video with Glenn came on, he paused it, rewound, and paused again. "That's him," he said. "Yes." He rubbed both hands over his face. "If this is real, you can't go back to that house. It's real." He nodded once. "Then we call state investigators from here, and we do not call anyone local." Before he could pick up the phone, something hit the front of the building. Not a knock, a hard impact, then another. We froze. A voice outside shouted, "Open up." "Glenn." I knew the voice at once. Dr. Levin whispered, "Back room." I grabbed the copied drive from the desk. He shoved the original into my hand and pushed me toward the hall. As I moved, the front glass broke. There's no clean way to describe what panic does to old men. Dr. Levin was not built for speed, but he moved anyway, limping fast toward the office doorway, just as Glenn came through the shattered front entrance with his gun drawn and his face slicked with blood down one side. He looked worse than I expected. The tire iron had split his scalp open above the ear. Blood had dried on his collar. One eye was swollen. He pointed the gun at Levin and said, "Where is he?" Levin said nothing. I was halfway down the hall behind the wall, able to see only part of the room through the office doorway. I should have run out the back then. I know that too. But I stayed because I could hear the smile in Glenn's voice, and because some stupid part of me still thought this might end with arrests instead of bodies. It did not. Glenn crossed the room and pistol-whipped Levin so hard the doctor went down on his knees. The sound was thick and awful. Glenn asked again where I was. Levin spat blood on the floor. Then Glenn shot him. A close shot to the face. The back of Levin's head hit the filing cabinet and spread there in a way I can still see when I close my eyes. One lens from his glasses spun under the desk. I bit my hand to keep from making noise. Glenn stepped over him and started down the hall. There was nowhere to go except the exam room and a rear exit beyond it. I ran, shoulder hit the swinging door, stumbled past the steel table and heard him behind me. The rear exit stuck from swelling in the frame. I yanked once, twice, and got it open just as a shot tore through the door panel above my head. I went out into the alley and fell on wet concrete. Behind the office was a row of dumpsters, a fence, and the narrow service lane leading to the next building. I ran bent over, waiting for the next shot. It didn't come. When I looked back from the mouth of the lane, Glenn was dragging something toward the rear door. Dr. Levin's body. He hauled him by one ankle, head bumping over the threshold. That image has stayed with me almost as vividly as Mara's murder report. The ease of it. The way a man can drag a fresh corpse like a sack of feed when he has done worse before. I ran until my chest felt full of glass. By dawn, I was in Halpern County at the house of a woman named Jessa Moore. I found her name in the audio file metadata when I checked the copied version on Levin's computer before he died. Jessa had once worked intake at a women's shelter. Mara had probably used her as a contact for someone trying to disappear. I was guessing, but grief had burned most of my caution away. Jessa opened the door with a tire iron in her hand and a cigarette behind one ear. She was in her 30s, broad-shouldered, wearing a stained sweatshirt and no patience on her face. I said Mara's name, and whatever she saw in me made her lower the tire iron. She let me in, listened, and did something nobody else had done yet. She believed me immediately. She knew pieces already. Not names, not proof, but the shape of it. Girls coming in beaten and then vanishing before paperwork was done. Law enforcement turning dismissive when certain counties were involved. One deputy who showed up drunk at the shelter, asking too many questions about where women got sent next. Jessa said she had warned Mara to stop digging alone. I asked why she didn't go public. She laughed without humor. Public with what? A feeling? You think anybody cares unless a rich girl gets taken? We used her laptop to send copies of everything to 3 places at once. A reporter in the city, a state investigator office general inbox, and a legal aid group Jessa trusted. We attached the videos, scans, photos, and a plain summary of what we knew. Jessa also called somebody directly, a former client advocate married to a state trooper in another district. She did not leave details, only said there were bodies and corrupt deputies, and this needed to go around the local chain. Then we waited for the knock, or the call, or the sound of tires and gravel. What came first was the news. Dr. Levin's office had burned. Electrical fire, according to early radio chatter. 1 fatality. No confirmed identity pending notification. Jessa and I looked at each other across her kitchen table. Electrical fire, she said. I said nothing. My hands were steady by then in a way that scared me. That afternoon, a state investigator named Carol Wynn called Jessa's landline. Not mine. Smart woman. She asked questions nobody local had asked. File names, locations, whether copies existed elsewhere, whether I was safe. She said units were being sent to secure the Miller property and the old Cobb lot. She told us not to move. I wanted to believe her. I mostly did. Then Jessa's dog started barking at the back of the house. Her place sat alone beyond a tree farm. Good for privacy, bad for help. We looked out and saw a tow truck easing into the yard. Jeff Corman's company logo on the side. Jessa swore. That's one of the names? Yes. The truck stopped. 2 men got out. Jeff was big and heavy through the middle. Shaved head, beard gone gray at the chin. The other man limped. Randy Lusk. I had seen the limp in Mara's photo behind Miller's property. Neither man came to the front door. They went around back. Jessa grabbed the shotgun from above the fridge. I took the kitchen knife because it was there, and because fear makes stupid weapons feel better than empty hands. The dog was losing its mind, hurling itself at the mudroom door. Then the power went out. The house dropped into that dead, unnatural, quiet electrical things leave behind when they stop humming. A second later, something heavy hit the back door. Jessa shouted that she had called police. Jeff laughed from the other side and said, "I know." The next hit splintered the frame. Jessa told me to get out through the front and run for the woods. I told her no. The third hit broke the door open inward. The dog launched first, straight at the opening. A gunshot went off. The dog yelped once and tumbled back into the mudroom, spraying blood over the washing machine. Jeff came through the doorway with a revolver in one hand. Jessa fired the shotgun from 10 feet away. At that distance, it was not a movie. It was ruin. The blast caught Jeff high in the chest and neck and tore him open. He hit the wall so hard a framed picture fell above him. Blood and meat spread across the pale paint in a fan. One side of his throat was simply gone. He made a choking whine, dropped the gun, and slid down the wall, leaving a thick red stripe. He kept moving on the floor for a few seconds with both hands pawing at nothing, then stopped. Randy fired through the broken doorway. The shot punched into the cabinets. Jessa pumped the shotgun and fired again. She missed him but shattered the porch light and part of the frame. I ran low and grabbed Jeff's revolver from the floor. Randy limped sideways along the porch, trying to get angle. I cut through the dining room toward the side window and saw him just outside, face flushed, gun up, mouth hanging open in concentration. He looked like a man trying to remember instructions. I shot him through the glass. The first bullet took him high in the shoulder and spun him. He screamed, dropped against the siding, and fired wild. Jessa came around from the kitchen and fired the shotgun through the broken window frame at almost point-blank range. It hit his stomach. He folded over himself as if he had been kicked from the inside. I had never seen that kind of wound. Belly opened, clothing shredded, loops of intestine pushing out through his hands when he grabbed himself. He fell off the porch into the dirt and made an ugly animal sound I'll hear until I die. He tried to stand once. His guts came farther out. He slipped in them and crashed onto his side. Jessa walked onto the porch and aimed the shotgun down at his face. She did not speak. She fired. What was left of his head hit the dirt in pieces. There is a line people imagine between ordinary life and violence. They think you cross it once and everything changes in a clean way. It isn't clean. It's messy and immediate and full of practical thoughts. More men, ammunition, phones dead, doors, bleeding. The horror comes later when your hands are free. Jessa reloaded with shaking fingers and said, "He wasn't alone." She was right. I heard the engine before I saw the vehicle. Sheriff Darnell's SUV came up the driveway fast enough to fishtail in the gravel. He got out alone. No lights, no siren. Just him with a rifle in his hands and his face set in an expression I can only call tired. Tired of this, tired of us, tired of the work required to keep bad things covered. He took in the yard in one look. Jeff ruined on the wall inside. Randy spread in the dirt. Broken door, broken glass. Jessa and me visible in bursts as we moved. Then he raised the rifle and fired into the house. Wood exploded off the doorframe near my head. Jessa dragged me down behind the kitchen island. He called out, "You're making this worse than it needed to be." Jessa shouted back, "You murdered Mara." He answered, "No, I cleaned up after her." I went cold all over. Maybe he meant it one way, maybe another, but I heard confession in it. He kept talking as he circled outside, voice moving past windows. He said Mara had been warned, said she liked poking into filth she didn't understand, said some girls were already too broken to save, and some money kept departments running when the county cut budgets to the bone. He said ugly things happen everywhere, and at least here they were controlled. Controlled. Like women in pits and girls in windowless buildings were a leak in a roof you patched and forgot. Jessa whispered that she had 3 shells left. I checked Jeff's revolver. 2 rounds. Darnell fired again. The round came through the wall above the sink. Another through the living room. He was not rushing. He was hunting. Then he made a mistake. He came to the side of the house, close enough that I saw the shadow of his legs through the torn curtain. I moved before thinking, went to the shattered dining room window, crouched below it, then rose fast and fired both remaining rounds where his torso should be. 1 missed. 1 hit. He grunted and stumbled back into view, clutching his side. Not down, but hurt. He swung the rifle up toward the window. Jessa fired first. The shotgun blast caught his thigh and hip. He dropped to 1 knee in the yard. He was tougher than he had any right to be. He still shouldered the rifle and fired from there. The shot hit Jessa in the chest. She jerked backward and sat down hard against the wall, more surprised than anything for the first second. Then blood spread across her sweatshirt in a dark, fast bloom. I remember yelling her name. I remember the dog dead in the mudroom. Jeff leaking down the wall. Randy's torn body in the dirt. The house smelling like powder and blood and warm insulation. All of it at once. Darnell tried to stand. I went out the front door with the kitchen knife in my hand. That sounds insane even now. A man with a rifle, and I ran at him with a knife. But he was trying to get up and his leg was ruined, and there was no time for thought, only movement. He saw me and swung the rifle barrel. I grabbed it with both hands. The hot metal burned my palm. We struggled there in the yard, close enough to smell each other. He was stronger than I expected. Old man strength from hauling things, from doing work that leaves ropey muscle under fat. He hit me in the mouth with his forehead and one of my teeth cut through my lip. He said very calmly, "You should have let it go." I drove the knife into his neck. Not deep the first time. It hit collarbone and slid. Blood came hot over my hand. He made a sound like a cough and punched me in the side of the head. The world tilted. I held onto the rifle and stabbed again. This time the blade went under the jaw. His eyes changed. That is the only way I can put it. changed from intention to confusion. He dropped the rifle and both hands went to his throat. Blood came between his fingers in thick pulses. He sank sideways into the gravel, legs kicking once. I knelt over him because I thought he might still somehow get up. He didn't. He rolled onto his back, choking through the hole in his neck, trying and failing to make words. The blood filled his mouth faster than he could cough it out. I watched him die. I wish I had something noble to say about that. Relief, justice, closure. What I felt was mainly exhaustion and a deep, sick disappointment that killing him did not bring Mara back, did not erase Levin's face, did not empty the pit under Nina Cobb's lot. It only made one more body on the pile, even if this one deserved the ground more than most. Jessa was still alive when I got back inside. Barely. The bullet had gone through, but not cleanly. She was breathing in short, wet pulls and trying to press both hands over the wound. I tore towels from a drawer and pushed them against her chest. She grabbed my wrist and said, "Phone." The landline was dead. My cell had no signal. Hers somehow caught one bar when I held it near the living room window. I called Carol Wynn back from the recent numbers and shouted what happened before the signal cut. I think enough got through because 20 minutes later, maybe 30, state vehicles rolled into the yard with lights flashing and rifles aimed. Everything after that was noise and cold and statements and ambulances and men trying to separate me from the story while I clung to it with both hands. Jessa survived. That still feels like one of the only decent facts in this whole thing. The search of Miller's property turned up 3 women alive in a locked basement room under one of the buildings. 2 were so starved they could barely walk. 1 had a broken wrist that had healed wrong. There were restraints bolted to concrete, stained mattresses, ledgers, disposable phones, receipts for fuel in motel rooms, and enough DNA in that place to fill a courthouse for years. The old Cobb lot gave up 6 bodies. Later they found 2 more sites on county land, and one behind a hunting cabin owned through a fake LLC linked to Jeff Corman. More bodies there too. Not all women. One was a teenage boy. Glenn was arrested at a private clinic 40 miles away, where he'd gone for stitches under a false name. He denied everything until the videos surfaced publicly, then tried to say he was undercover. Nobody bought it. Tate ran for 2 days and was found in a drainage culvert with a pistol and enough meth in his system to kill a horse. He lived. I don't know why that bothered me, but it did. There were other arrests: county workers, drivers, 2 businessmen, a pastor, men who had bought access, and men who had arranged transport, and men who had simply looked away for money or favors. The town split open under it. Families stopped talking. Wives found out husbands had been paying for girls driven through properties they had picnicked beside. Mothers recognized jewelry pulled from evidence bags. Men who had laughed at Mara's mouthy attitude suddenly talked about her courage, like they had always admired it. I wanted to put their faces through glass. The official story that emerged over months was part trafficking ring, part local corruption, part opportunistic violence. That's true, I guess, but it also makes it sound organized in a smart way. A lot of it was uglier and more pathetic than that. Weak men abusing whatever power they had. Richer men buying what they wanted because the poor were easy to disappear. Deputies smoothing roads ahead of them. Dump sites chosen because nobody expected much from missing women with bad records, no family or bad luck. And Mara. Mara had seen enough to become a problem. She had helped at least one girl get away. She had recorded things, followed people, collected names, She probably thought she could build something too solid to ignore. What happened to her on Route 8 came out in pieces from Glenn, Tate, and later phone data. Tate approached her at the gas station because she recognized him from Miller's property, and he recognized that recognition. He got in her car under some pretext, or forced his way in before cameras could catch it. Glenn followed in his cruiser, off official call logs. They drove her to the ditch road when she tried to turn toward town. She fought. Hard. The cuts in her palm came from grabbing the folding knife Glenn used to threaten her. She slashed his forearm with it before he took it back. They beat her beside the car when she refused to tell them where her evidence was. At some point, Darnell arrived. The examiner was right that she was probably alive for much of it. Wrong, maybe, about whether she was dead when they opened her stomach. Glenn eventually claimed Darnell did that in a panic after she kept trying to speak through broken teeth, as if making the body worse would make the crime look crazier, less traceable, more like the work of a madman than officers and their pet idiots. He said Darnell wanted to scare anyone who found her, make the whole thing feel like random savagery. I have thought about that more than any other detail. My sister lying there unable to move, trying to speak, and one of those men deciding she needed to be made into a warning. I don't know what words she was trying to say. Maybe my name, maybe theirs. Maybe nothing anybody deserved to hear. People asked me afterward whether I felt haunted. Not in the way they mean. I never saw her standing in corners. Never heard her voice in empty rooms. The footsteps in the house stopped as soon as I left it for good, which tells me they belong to living men, not dead women. The mud on the kitchen floor was probably Tate or Glenn checking what she had left behind. That should make the story less supernatural, less dramatic. It does not make it less frightening. Because the truth was always worse. There was no ghost trying to tell me what happened. There were only people. Men with jobs, families, jokes, keys, church clothes, and badges. Men who learned they could hurt women without consequence and built routines around it. Men who dragged bodies under trailers and into pits and went home to wash up. That is what stays with me. There is one thing I have never told the papers, not because it is impossible, but because I still don't know what to make of it. After the arrests, after statements and court dates and all the public noise, I went back once to Mara's house to get the last of her things. The landlord had cleaned some, not much. The place smelled empty. No cigarettes, no coffee, no damp winter clothes. Just dust and old paint. I packed dishes into a box, folded shirts, took the notebooks that had not mattered to anyone but me. Under the couch cushion, I found a receipt from the gas station, dated the night she died. Cigarettes and soda, exactly like the video showed. On the back, in her handwriting, were 4 words. If I don't, you do. That was all. No name. No instructions. Just that. I stood in the middle of the living room holding the receipt and realized she had already known how this might end. Not exactly, maybe, but enough. Enough to know she might be handing the rest of it to me without asking. I still have that receipt in a plastic sleeve. The trials dragged on. Some pleas, some convictions, some deals that made me sick. Darnell never stood trial because I killed him first. There were days I worried that would leave some people doubting the worst of it, as if a dead sheriff could still hide behind ambiguity. Then more evidence came. Ledger books, financial transfers, Testimony from surviving women. One of the girls from Miller's basement identified him by his voice before she could even bear to look at his picture. Glenn got life. He looked smaller in court, shrunken by cameras and clean clothes. But when he turned once and our eyes met, I saw exactly the same man who had said your sister screamed too. A body can age 10 years under fluorescent lights and still carry the same rot. Tate got enough years that he'll be old if he walks free again. Curtis Vale died in jail after being beaten with a lock and a sock by another inmate who had a daughter among the missing. Jeff and Randy were already where I left them. Other men got sentences that sounded large on paper and tiny in my chest. The town never recovered. Good. Some things shouldn't. The gas station changed owners. Harlow's closed. The church lost half its members, and then pretended that was because of economic shifts. County Route 8 got a new guardrail near the ditch where Mara's car was found, as if metal could tidy memory. The woods still stand there. Trees don't care what happened under them. I moved away after the second trial and took a job in another state where nobody knows my last name. Most of the time that feels like survival. Sometimes it feels like betrayal. I dream about her less now, but when I do, she's almost never dead. She is sitting on porch steps after cleaning out our mother's trailer. She is laughing at something cruel but deserved. She is driving one hand on the wheel, cigarette tucked in the corner of her mouth, eyes on the road like she's already planning the next bad decision for the right reason. But sometimes the other dream comes. In that one, I am walking through dark woods, and I can hear somebody trying to speak through broken teeth. Not moaning, talking, working hard to make words while blood fills their mouth. I can never reach the sound in time. The ground keeps changing under my feet. Dirt gives way to linoleum, linoleum to gravel, gravel to the muddy floor of Mara's kitchen. Then I wake up with my hand over my stomach, as if some part of me expects to find it opened. There are people who hear the story and focus on the worst image. The pit, Mara's body, Levin shot in his office, Jess's dog in the mudroom, Randy trying to hold his insides in, Darnell drowning in his own blood. I understand that. Those are the parts that stick to the mind. But the thing that unsettles me most is smaller. It's the ordinary way it all lived alongside everything else. A deputy buying coffee after burying women. A sheriff signing paperwork with dirt from a clandestine grave under his nails. A tow truck driver laughing at a high school football game before helping move girls like cargo that same night. Mara handing meals to old people in the afternoon, and then parking on a dark road filming the men she knew might kill her. That's where the fear really sits. Not in shadows, in routine. I have told this as plainly as I can because plain is closer to truth. There was no curse, no demon, no family secret in the attic. There was a dead sister and the men who made her dead. There was what they did to her body. There was what she found before they stopped her. And there was me, stupid and late and scared, trying to carry what she left. If you want a lesson in it, I don't have one neat enough to hand over. People say speak up. She did. People say trust the law. She did until she learned better. People say monsters look wrong. They don't. Most of them look tired and local and mildly annoyed to be interrupted. The only thing I know for sure is that Mara was right about the town. It was rotten under the paint. And rot doesn't stay put. Last winter I drove back through the county for the first time in years because I had to sign something related to the civil suits. Snow along the ditches, gray sky, all the same roads. I passed County Route 8 without meaning to. The guardrail flashed by on my right, and my hands locked on the wheel so hard my knuckles hurt. I kept driving. A mile later, I pulled over and threw up in the snow. When I got back in the car, I noticed there was mud on the driver's floor mat. It was probably from my boots. That's the sensible answer. I had stopped at a rest area. I had walked across slush and dirt. Mud gets tracked in. End of story. Still, when I looked at it, I thought of the prints on Mara's kitchen floor. 3 partial shoe prints and a smear leading from the back door toward the hall. I sat there for a long time with the heater blowing and the wipers ticking over dry glass, looking at that mud. Then I took out the old gas station receipt from my wallet sleeve. If I don't, you do. I read it until the words blurred. Some nights I think I finished what she handed me. The men are named. The dead are counted. The survivors got out. The town will carry the stain forever. Some nights I think there is no finishing work like that, because what Mara found was not a single nest you burn out. It was a system made of appetites and excuses, and systems do what they always do. They spread, adapt, move one county over, change uniforms, change owners, keep feeding. That thought still scares me more than anything else. Not because I think my sister is coming back, because I know men like the ones who killed her never really went away. They are still out there somewhere, alive in towns with one grocery store, and one church, and one road where bad things happen. And another woman is probably already noticing too much.